recent years, they came out with a new strategy that they weaponize, and they call it anti-Semitism. They say, if you care for Jewish children, for Hasidic children, you're an anti-Semite, where they always take the side of the cult and never the side of the victims or the side of the children.
You're listening to The Brendon Marotta Show.
In this episode, I talked to Yochanan Lowen, a man who was raised Hasidic Jewish and as an adult sued the Canadian government for the lack of education he received. As a child, he was only taught Hasidic Jewish values and didn't know basic things about reading and math. His struggle is profiled in the documentary I Want to Know, and in this episode, Yochanan is very candid about the abuse he received in that community and the need to protect Jewish children. A bit of a trigger warning for this episode because, like I said, he is very candid about that abuse, but I believe his story deserves to be heard. So without further ado, here is Yochanan. There's a lot of places that we could start, but the question that stood out to me was, why is it that Hasidic people are very afraid of assimilation? Because it seems to me like a lot of the things that you were dealing with growing up and the things that you were dealing with in your lawsuit are around preventing assimilation. So what is it about that that's so bad to people from that community?
So I think most Hasidic people are not so afraid of assimilation, but they are all the time, 24/7, threatened and frightened of the monster that's called assimilation on a 24/7 basis, maybe. From the day they were born, and especially since they become like about 2 years old or 3 years old or older. And it's everywhere. It's in the synagogue, it's in the yeshiva, the cheder, the Talmud Torah, or the schools. It's at home. It's in there, especially some Hasidic communities live in ghettos, like in their own shtetls. For example, you have in New Square, you have in Monroe, you have here in Quebec, you have Kiryas Tosh. You have different places like this. You have in Israel, yeah, they have their own shtetls. So they are feeded with the mother's milk that assimilation is the worst thing that could ever happen, and they shouldn't even think outside the box. They shouldn't even question if assimilation is so bad, because if they question it, then it will be taken care of. They wouldn't be allowed to question too much, you know.
So it sounds like, go ahead.
I wonder if you watched the documentary called One of Us.
Yes,
on Netflix.
Yes, I actually interviewed someone who appeared in that documentary on this show. I thought that might have been how you found me or found my podcast. Is that the case?
Oh, maybe I did. Can you remind me the name? Maybe I did saw that.
Ari, and I'm blanking on his last name.
Okay, it's very possible. I don't remember which show of you I saw.
Yeah,
but I think I watched you interviewing one of the
yes,
former Hasidim or something like this.
Yes. So it sounds like there's a monster version of assimilation created in the minds of people in the Hasidic community.
Yeah,
and even to question that monster is to kind of let it in. In other words, if you start saying, well, maybe it's not that bad, you're kind of participating in it in a certain way.
Definitely. And you have similar thing when it comes towards sexuality, for example. Where even in a culture where even masturbation was considered worse than murder.
Wow. Why is it that that's considered so bad?
Most of these brainwashings and threats is based on early sources like the Talmud, the Midrash, the Zohar, but it's done in a very manipulating manner where certain Talmudic texts, they will hide from you if it doesn't fit that same image, and they will only allow you to know. They will only treat you and offer you and preaching to you the text that they want you to know, and they will hide from you the other contradictive text where it doesn't fit the goal. So, for example, we were told a lot about heaven and hell, and they are publishing books and anthologies and collections from rabbinic sources about hell, but we were never even told once that there are rabbinic opinions who deny hell. We were never told that. And I believe that in these collections that they publish, they maybe wouldn't even mention it for the same reason. And that's why it took me decades, not just for me, but I know many other Hasidim that were seeking these knowledge, and it took me so many decades to even find out that there are different rabbinic opinions about hell and stuff like that. And the same thing when it comes to, for example, to secular education. We were never told that there are rabbis who were pro-secular education. We were never told that there are famous rabbis since the Middle Ages that believe that masturbation is not always a sin. We were never told that. So just to give you an example how the knowledge, even though it's based on the rabbinic sources, but it's censored, which rabbinic sources we're going to tell you, and you're allowed to know, and you have to know it, and which rabbinic sources you shouldn't even know that they exist. You know?
Mm.
So if anyone would say these are just following the earlier rabbis from the Middle Ages, this would be a lie. Because if this would be true, why should they hide the other opinions that come also from the Middle Ages?
So it's not, yeah. So it sounds like in the Hasidic community, it's not just avoiding assimilating into the larger culture, but even transitioning to other forms of Judaism or other interpretations of the same
100%,
texts.
100%. And but they will even hide not just for example, in the Haredi community, they will not just hide, they will not just censor you from the outside knowledge, but even knowledge from their own rabbis that they claim to follow from the 17th century, 18th century, 16th century, and Talmudic centuries and so on. They would hide even those rabbis. They will censor even those rabbis in practice, and even sometimes, many times in print. Even they would censor different lines and different paragraphs. They would censor. There's actually a professor, an Orthodox Jewish professor named Mark Shapiro, who published a book about this inner Haredi, inner Orthodox censorship, ultra-Orthodox inner censorship, or pious censorship, as others called it. The name of his book is Changing the Immutable. And it's all about censoring their own rabbis, not censoring outside rabbis or Reform rabbis or unorthodox rabbis. No, censoring their own rabbis that they claim to follow.
I found your story really relatable because I grew up in the evangelical Christian community, which is obviously very different, but I think there are some parallels in terms of the idea that the sacred text can only be interpreted a particular way and other interpretations are forbidden in some way, and similar attitudes towards sexuality. But I know that growing up in that environment, the emotional experience of that is very unique and sometimes hard to articulate to people outside it. So I'm curious for you, what was it like growing up in that and being a child in that environment?
So I'm not sure where to start and where to end, but I
Yeah,
grew
I
up
did
in a
ask a pretty
very,
broad question. So,
yeah, I grew up not just in a regular ultra-Orthodox community, but I grew up both in London, England, and in Canada. I grew up in specific extra extremist groups and ghettos, not just regular ultra-Orthodox or regular Hasidic. And so it's layers on layers on layers. And then my family was also a specifically dysfunctional family, and my mother suffered a mental illness, and I didn't even know that she is suffering. So every night and every day, I thought this is the last crazy night ever, where my parents are fighting with each other, and she's threatening that she's going to die, and who knows what's going to happen. And they can fight physically against each other in front of the children, sometimes, uh, like um, like lifting chairs against each other. And every night I thought this is the last time ever. And not tonight is going to be everything solved, because no one ever told me that my mother is BPD, borderline personality disorder, and stuff like this. So every night there was um, a disappointment again, and this went on for years and decades. In fact, until my marriage, where I was forcibly, manipulatively and forcibly engaged to my wife at the age of 17, married at 18, and reproduced children, all forcibly. Thanks God that we only had 4 children and not 18 like my aunt had.
so when you say forcibly or coerced into it, what does that mean?
So I think there are different types. I think that all Haredi, all Orthodox and Hasidic marriages are done by force, but obviously there are different types of force and coercion. So in the extreme form, it would be where I know, for example, a Hasidic Torah scholar, an author in Monsey, who literally took a was giving lashes, was hitting his uh, his his bride daughter on the day of the chuppah, that she shall go to the wedding. But this is in extreme cases. In most cases, I don't think they do it. They do it in that way of physical force. But what they do all the time is in different types of coercion and manipulation. In many ways, it can be done by emotional and social, emotional blackmailing and coercion. It can be done by manipulations. It can be done by lies, and like my father did to me, stuff like that. Arranging lies together with other people, arranging agents that would would participate in these lies and manipulations,
Hold
and
on.
you
So
don't know that you are played into it.
so what specifically happened in your case? What was the lie? If you don't mind
In my
it.
case, yeah, and sometimes this is done even before. In some ways, this could be done even before you got engaged, but it can also happen after you got engaged already, and they want to make sure that it's going to continue the engagement and you're going to actually do the marriage and so on. So in my case, for example, um, um, my someone came to me, a Hasidic guy who was a teacher, a Hasidic Torah teacher. He came to me and told me a story that he was meeting up with a Hasidic psychic in Jerusalem, and my name came up in the conversation. And because this Hasidic psychic, he said he could see on my name, and he could see on my name everything that goes on with my soul in different spiritual worlds. And he could see, for example, that most people in this world don't find their their soulmate. They don't find their soulmate. But there are very few people in the world who do find their soulmate. One Hasidic version of that is that three people in a generation are actually finding their soulmate. So, and this psychic, he said, saw on my name that I am one of the few who actually found their soulmate. So imagine when you are manipulated in that way at the age of 17, and your degree of knowledge about the world is less than your 6-year-old has because of your insular upbringing and brainwashing. So then what will this do to you? You can imagine.
Yeah, I take it that
And this was just the beginning. This was just the first step, and it continued with many, different steps.
So I take it this person had not visited any psychic and anything like that.
No, he probably never visited that psychic. And even if he did, he never talked about this psychic, to this rabbi psychic saint about me. And it was all made up, but I only realized this many years later, that this was all made up.
Are you still with the woman you married as a result of that?
Yes, and I'm in love with her, and I hope to stay with her forever. And we had 4 children together.
That is,
and not just that, but people would say that we are, first of all, we are in Canada the first married couple who left the fold, first family who left the fold with both parents as a family. And some people would say that not just in Canada, many people told me that even globally in the Hasidic world, we are maybe the first family of Hasidic elite, first married couple, or family of Hasidic elite who left the fold, and many others were inspired by us after to do the same, or to try to do the same, and in different ways inspired. But we help out people, even people who don't think about leaving the fold at all. My wife and me are doing a lot to help them make their life easier, even inside the fold. Especially when it comes to people who are married, people who are parents, and they can't think about leaving because, for example, they don't want to lose their children. Right?
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
That is wild that the two of you, one, went through that gaslighting, but then there's a weird way in which it sounds like it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, just maybe not in the way the people who made it intended it for it to go.
Yes, it does.
You two must have a very strong relationship to have gone through that together.
Yes, and it was not in plan. Many things happened, like unforeseen things and extraordinary circumstances that enabled us, and simultaneously enabled us to leave the fold, pushed us out, and everything like this. We never had this in plan, and we had to work on each other also for many years.
What does that mean, working on each other?
Because, for example, in the beginning, after my marriage, whenever I visited a Jewish public library, I have to hide it from my wife, because in our upbringing, we both grew up in the same ghetto in Quebec. And in our upbringing, visiting a library was one of the biggest sins you can imagine.
Got it. So So there's a level of trust you had to reach where are you going to be okay with the parts of me that are
Yeah,
going away from what we were taught growing up?
definitely. Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think made the two of you strong enough to make that leap or that change where others were not able to? Because I think the norm for everyone in the world or the default is for people to continue with whatever they were taught growing up and never question it or make a change, let alone a change as big as you've made.
So you said what pushed me to think outside the box?
Yeah, what pushed you to do it? And then what also made you strong enough to do it, to do it successfully?
Okay, so I think the second question is maybe is something that I was asked many times, that I was talking about it many times, and it actually happened to my 9-year-old son at the time, where one day he ran away from the yeshiva without permission during lunchtime, and we didn't send him back to the yeshiva since that day, and that's how the journey for the whole family started. In this was like the first step of of a whole process of extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary situations that enabled us and pushed us out. But if my son would not do that, my 9-year-old, we would probably still be Hasidic or ultra Orthodox till today, the whole family of 6.
So it sounds like seeing your son question it and you as a parent not wanting him to repeat the same experience that you'd had kind of awakened the same part of you that maybe as a kid thought, I don't know about this.
Yeah, because we felt responsible for him.
Hmm.
So we couldn't, if you sacrifice yourself for whatever reason, that's one thing, but you don't have the right to sacrifice your children, right?
Agreed.
So yeah. So what happened is that I don't know how familiar you are with the Orthodox community, but in the ultra Orthodox community, you have mainly 3 sections. In the Orthodox community, you have 4 main sections, you could say, of 4 main denominations. So you have the Hasidim, who many of them speak Yiddish, right? Then you have the Yeshivish or Litvish. Litvish means Lithuanian, and they are speaking like English in America. Then you have Chabad Lubavitch. There's a movement for itself. So they are Hasidic, but they are Hasidim, but it's not Hasidic. That's very different than the regular Hasidim. It's a kind of a modern movement, outreach movement and Messianic movement and whatever. So this is Chabad Lubavitch. And then the 4th section would be modern Orthodox. And so what we wanted to do when my son ran away from this Hasidic yeshiva, we wanted to send him to a Litvish yeshiva instead. That is still a part of ultra Orthodoxy. But what happened is that some people, my father, for example, ganged up with Hasidic rabbis here to put pressure on the other yeshivas not to accept my son into their yeshiva. And the reason is because they said my son has to stay in the Hasidic yeshiva and not go to the Litvish yeshiva. And because of that, my son was sabotaged, that he was not accepted in the other yeshivas. So for over a year, he had no yeshiva, no school at the age of 9 until the age of 10. And then that's how it happened that we were kind of we were enforced to register him into a modern Jewish school, modern Orthodox co-ed school, boys and girls. And that's how everything happened. So basically, if not this sabotage, we would still be ultra Orthodox today. So,
It,
I always say, like in the story of Joseph in the Bible in Genesis, where Joseph told his brothers that they sold him for slavery and they wanted to hurt him, but in the end it was for the good, because he rescued not just his own family, but he rescued the whole world, or the whole Middle East, from hunger, from the 7 years hunger in Egypt. And it only happened because he was sold by his brothers for slavery.
hmm.
So I said that these sabotage against my son only, in the end, it was only the first step to a journey of freedom for the whole family. So in the end, they could never have done me a greater favor, a greater good than this. So I'm actually, in a weird way, I'm grateful for them, that for the sabotage they did.
It sounds like in your life you've had a lot of interesting synchronicities or events where on first glance they looked harmful or maybe even intended to push you into doing something you didn't want to do, that worked out better. So your marriage, your son changing schools, and in the documentary that you're in, you are an advocate for education. You're
Right.
fighting to ensure that Hasidic children gain access to the same education and information that everyone in public schooling has. And when did that
Yeah.
start? When did you become an advocate for education?
So I think this started even before I even know the term of lawsuit and stuff like this. I was just talking to my wife in a taxi, and I was saying, that's crazy. How can the government allow this? And how come no one holds them accountable? And how is this possible to go on? But it took me many years since I said that to my wife until I was able to activate it and to, the first, I still have, I think I still have this first paper that I wrote to the government or to a lawyer about the lawsuit. And I can assure you that you're 7 years old can write a paper 10 times better than I wrote this paper in my uh, in my 30s, because I left the fold at the age of 31, and I did this in a later stage. But then the lawsuit was filed in November 2014 for the first time, and it was going on for 6 years, and then there was a big revolution happening here because of that for all Hasidic boys, or all Hasidic boys schools in Quebec, and I'm very proud with that. Although I don't know if the fight is over, and I don't know if it's if the fight is completed. I'm sure it's not, but whatever change happened, I'm proud of that.
So, what was the aim of your lawsuit, and what was the outcome of that?
So in the beginning of the lawsuit, we were demanding reparations. But then after a few months, my lawyer told me that he doesn't think that this is going to work. He's afraid it's not going to work. So he changed the lawsuit to be not for any money demand. So the lawsuit was going on for 6 years for no money demand. The demand was only for a whatchamacallit, declaration, judgment declaration against the government, that the government doesn't do its job or something like this. And in the end, what happened? The during the years, the government was enforced to intervene a little bit, and they created new this new program that they called it a homeschool program, where the Hasidic boys are enrolled somehow a little bit for secular education on a daily basis, I think, and that's what happened because of the lawsuit, I was told.
Now, did the lawsuit itself, did you win that or not? Because I'd looked up online and it said that you hadn't.
That's right. So it's a kind of maybe a paradox where, according to my understanding, to what I was told, my lawyer told me that it could be taken as a loss in one hand and as a win in the other hand. So basically, the judge said that since the government started already to fix the problem, that's why he is not going to give a declaratory judgment against the government. So, but why did the government start to fix the problem? Is it because of our lawsuit? So then how would you define it, as a win or a loss? So I don't know what to answer on that.
Got it. So you didn't win the lawsuit because the government did what you wanted the lawsuit to accomplish.
Exactly.
That
Or
sounds like a win to
started,
me.
At least started.
Started, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel satisfied with the outcome, or do you feel like there's still more work to be done?
Oh, I think there's a lot of more work to be done, both in regards to the system of education, but also I believe very much in reparations, not just for me and my family, but also for thousands of other Hasidim, and both who are inside or outside. And I think as long no one is held accountable, how can you ever expect any meaningful change if no one is held accountable?
Yeah.
Why should anyone do anything if no one is held accountable? Not the parents, not the Hasidic system, not the Hasidic schools, not the Hasidic leadership, not the government. If no one is held accountable, why should anyone change anything? So for me, it's even for me, I can't even understand why something was done if no one is really held accountable. So, but that's how I see it.
It sounds like some change was accomplished so that maybe accountability wouldn't happen. Like, see, we're doing something. You don't have to go further.
Yes, maybe. Yes. But I think that, and I think it has a lot to do. I think it maybe mostly has to do not with the Hasidim themselves or with the government. I think maybe mostly it has to do with society and the tolerance or indifference of society. I believe if society would care, and this will be talked about every day or every week on radio, on TV, then things will have to change for the better, and people will be held accountable. But if no one cares and no one talks about it, and no one is held accountable, so what do you expect?
Yeah, I'm curious what you think accountability would look like on this. In other words, if they were to give all the things you wanted, what would that look like?
I don't know. Maybe politicians should go to prison. But I think the most important is reparations for people who were abused. That's one thing. Another thing is the lawsuit that we did was only about education. The lawyers didn't talk about anything else besides education. What I would like to do is to file a different lawsuit about abuse.
So when you say
yeah.
when you say abuse, what do you mean? Because I think education is a bit easier to quantify in the sense of, well, can this person read? Can they write? Can they do basic math? And one of the things that you've talked about in the documentary is that a lot of that was foregone for you in favor of just religious education. But when you say
Right.
abuse, what do you mean by that?
Okay, that's the million-dollar question. So first of all, many people would say that the uneducation, the things that we are not getting educated in the Hasidic system, is the minor abuse. The bigger abuse is the Hasidic education itself, meaning the education they do give us is harmful education, and no one talked about this. So basically, it would be mental abuse. But besides the mental abuse that goes on a 24/7 basis, there's a lot of other abuses that goes on at the same time, including physical, that was going on at the same time, including physical abuse, sexual abuse in different ways, both physical sexual abuse, but also mental sexual abuse, and economical abuse and financial abuse and social abuse, and emotional abuse. So all these stuff, my lawyers never talked about it. They only focused on education, and that's why many people told me that we should file a lawsuit about abuse, not just about education.
So when you describe all of that abuse, what specifically does that mean? Because I think sexual abuse, I don't know if that's something you've experienced or not. It's up to you, whatever you want to share about your own experience.
I did experience sexual
Okay.
sexual abuse already in kindergarten by the Hasidic teacher himself.
Okay. That's a
And
lot.
this was in London, England.
Yeah.
I came to Canada the first time at the age of 10, and the second time at the age of 13.
And do you feel like that is normalized in that world, or is this just something? Because I'm certain the counter argument they would make, so there's bad people in every group, and this wasn't
No,
something.
it's not like in every group for different reasons. So, for example, so it's similar to, I would say, to the Catholic Church controversies about sexual abuse. I think in many ways it's similar. So for example, the silencing that you should not go to the police, and you could not go to the authorities, and you always take the side. The community has to always take the side of the abusers, and the side of the system, and the leadership, and the principals, and not the side of the victims, and you shun the victims. That's one thing. And the second thing is that in a regular society, people are not so sex craved and sex desperate, sexual desperation, that they feel that they need to do sex with children. Okay, but in the Hasidic system, for the same reason as in the Catholic Church, you do have this idea. That's number two. Number three, in a regular society, in a regular system, many people, even if they would like to have sexual relations with children, they wouldn't do it because they are aware that they are afraid of the authorities, or they are aware of how much it harms the children. And since they are good people in their heart, they would be afraid to harm children, right? But in the Hasidic system, I can say about myself, we never heard even the term of rape. We never heard the term of, maybe rape we heard in a different language, like maybe in biblical language, but we never heard the term of sexual abuse or pedophilia. We never heard the terms. And we were never told that there's a difference between having sexual relations with a 10-year-old child, or having sexual relations with a 15-year-old child, or having sexual relations with a 35-year-old. We were never told there's a difference. The only thing we were told is that sex with anyone who is not your partner, not your wife or your husband, is forbidden, is taboo. But we were never told that there are differences between sex with children or sex with adults. So that's why whenever Hasidim decide they do want to sin, many times they're not even aware that when they do it with children, it's different than when they would commit the sin with 20-year-old, 30-year-olds. You see what's going on?
Yeah.
So why should they ever keep away from children if they don't know about any harm they don't know anything about psychology, they were never educated, they never heard or never understood, they never learned about how children can be harmed by that for life, how detrimental it is. So why should they stay away from it? For them, it's not different than cheating to eat as a McDonald's sandwich. It's even maybe a lesser problem than for many of them, than to eat a tray ham and cheese sandwich.
It also sounds like a younger victim is less likely to rat them out and more vulnerable.
Exactly. So that's why it happens all the time. It's just natural. I don't even know how things could be different. I mean, in the system, the way it's built, how could it be any different?
And it sounds like also there's the physical abuse, but then there's also the mental, emotional abuse of not being able to express what's going on or have the language, or maybe even guilt and shame.
Exactly.
That did you cause it in some way? Are you bad for engaging in this even though you didn't choose?
And then there's another type of sexual abuse that I was told recently, and I wonder if you know about, if you would have information about it. I was told recently then, when people are manipulated by mental sexual abuse, by mental sexuality, it's also considered sexual abuse. So, for example, if you have a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old where his principal in the yeshiva will manipulate and control him by saying that he can see on his face, he knows that he is sinning, that he touches his penis with his hands, or that he masturbates, or that he has dirty thoughts, and the boy who listens to the principal or to their classmates saying that, they get so ashamed and red faced, and they think that they are the only sinner in the whole yeshiva, the whole school, and they wonder how the principal knows about it. And that way the principal is manipulating and controlling the child in general. And I'm not talking for sex, that this also happened many times, but even controlling in other ways. I was told by someone who is involved that this someone who themselves was a former Haredi, Chabadnik, Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox. I was told that this is also considered sexual abuse. Would you agree to that?
It's certainly psychological abuse. I'll bet that in the sexual abuse literature, there's a technical specific term for that, but I'm not familiar enough with it to be able to give that to you.
Okay, and this was going on all the time.
Yeah.
In when I was in yeshiva as a child and as a teenager, this was on 24/7 basis.
Why would someone in a school principal say that? Because I have a hard time believing that they think there's some sort of, psychic ability they have to see who has impure thoughts or something like that. So is that just conscious lying on their part, or is there
Obviously, it's conscious lying.
yeah.
But they, because because they know that every 15-year-old has dirty thoughts,
Sure.
and they know
Yeah.
that. But the child doesn't know, because in a yeshiva where no one is allowed to express themselves sexually, or to talk about sex, or to talk about penis, or to talk about private parts, or anything like this, how could a 12-year-old or 15-year-old or 18-year-old be aware that he's not the only sinner in the whole yeshiva,
Right.
But the adult principal, who is 25-year-old or 30-year-old or 50-year-old, they are aware, so that's why they can manipulate.
How is it that you've worked
And
through? Go ahead.
sometimes it's done through the Rebbe. So in Hasidism, you have this idea of a holy Rebbe, holy saint, who can read your thoughts and your sins from your forehead. So, for example, in the ghetto where I grew up, the saint, who was called the Toshe Rebbe, he used to say openly in the yeshiva publicly that he knows, with his Holy Spirit, he knows everything you do on a 24/7 basis, and he even knows everything what every boy in the yeshiva thinks, what the thoughts that they have in their mind. He also knows. He also aware of it. So this was a big manipulation tactic.
I have trouble understanding the mindset of why someone would need to engage in that manipulation or
Because
I
control. Well,
yeah.
I believe that all cults, every cult in the world, works with these type of mind controlling.
Do you feel like Hasidic Judaism, as you were raised in, is a cult?
Oh, definitely. I don't think anyone doubts it. I think even the people who would try to say, oh, maybe it's not a cult, I think even them, when you talk to them in private, they will all admit that it's a cult. It's just a matter of PR. Not everyone wants to go publicly and say, yeah, it's a cult, But definitely Hasidic sect. I mean, what is the definition of a cult? If a Hasidic sect is not a cult, what is a cult? I would go even more than that. I was told by some people that they wonder if in the Western world, if there's any cult in the Western world that would be worse than the Hasidic cults.
I guess it's
like in America, in Britain, in Israel. Is there any cults? I wonder, is there any other cults that would be worse or the same type of control and abuse that you find in Hasidic sects?
I guess my curiosity about that comes from the fact that when people typically think about cults, there's usually a singular charismatic leader. And it sounds
but you
like
have this in Hasidic sects. Usually, first of all, I want to make a kind of reclaim. I'm not sure how it's called in English. That I'm not talking about Chabad Lubavitch, because they are a separate type of movement. I'm talking about Hasidic sects where the control is so much that you can't even speak the language of the country.
yeah, I think disclaimer is the word you're looking for. A disclaimer.
Disclaimer. Thank you for that. So, and as some people say, that Chabad are Hasidim, but not Hasidic. And even when I go in Chabad and I heard them talking about Hasidic people, they talk about the Hasidic people. They say they are Hasidic as if they themselves are not. That they talk about Hasidic people in third person, meaning that Chabad themselves are aware that they are not really Hasidic. They have a very different lifestyle, although they are Hasidim. Okay, they are Hasid. But the problem is with Chabad that some of the Chabad PR, they took on themselves to be the PR not just for Chabad itself, but for all Hasidim. And so when they make PR for all Hasidim, they talk in a way, they manipulate the talk, and they fool you as if all Hasidim are basically the same system as Chabad Lubavitch, when in truth, in fact, in reality, two different planets. Chabad Lubavitch is a different planet than the Hasidim who don't speak English. So and that's very abusive and manipulative from their side, from the Chabad side. Um, so usually Hasidic sects, usually how it works is that every Hasidic sect has a single how did you call it, a charismatic leader,
Yeah.
or a leader. Most of the time these charismatic leaders are born into a Hasidic dynasty, so and they are the leader of the community, and since this is true, since this is a fact, then how would this be different than other cults?
So you say dynasty, you mean that the founder of the sect or the leader of it, it's his kid who is going to inherit it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that kid's education might be different than the people who are within the sect, or that he might, the father, it sounds like in that situation, if the father knows certain things about how the organization really runs, he might tell his son that, whereas the others in the group might be treated differently. Is that an accurate understanding?
They are definitely treated differently. The children of the dynasty are definitely not treated the same as everyone else. That's no doubt for that. And that's even in simple financial and it's called, I think it's called nepotism. So the community where I grew up, for example, is a very much nepotism system when it comes to the dynasty of the leader.
Yeah.
And the family of the leader.
That's interesting. I didn't know that was the structure of the community.
But that's also, some would say that that's also one of the differences between Hasidim and Litvish. Because although others would say that the Litvish systems today work in a lot of ways like the Hasidim. And sometimes people say that Litvish are even worse in some ways, in some places, in some areas, where they would say, for example, in Bnei Brak and different Litvish communities, that people would say that these Litvaks in Bnei Brak are even more Hasidim than Hasidim. Even they are even worse than Hasidim. But many people would definitely say that one of the differences between the Hasidic system and the Yeshivish or Litvish system is that the Litvish are not so much based on dynasties. They are based because their leader was not born in a dynasty. Usually, the Litvish leaders are regular people who are not born into a dynasty, but because of their Torah knowledge, they became leaders. Not because sometimes they are born into a dynasty, because sometimes these people are already the son of a famous leader, right? But not always. Many times, or most of the time, many times in the Litvish community, the leaders are not children of a leader. So it works in a different way. But in the Hasidic sect, most Hasidic sects are based on dynasty.
It sounds like a distinction between what you're talking about and let's say less culturally religious traditions is that in other religious groups, someone can work their way up and become a leader. Someone could train to become a pastor or a rabbi, and their leadership would be conferred through some special knowledge or contribution to the religion or the religious group.
Special knowledge, or sometimes through special knowledge, sometimes through service of God and asceticism and saintliness, and sometimes you have a combination of both, but not necessarily through a dynasty. That's very true to a big degree, to a high degree in the Litvish system. You can find sometimes like this also happening among Hasidim, but most Hasidic sects are, in fact, the leadership are dynasties that goes back for generations.
One thing I wanted to ask about was the financials, because part of your lawsuit was the idea that not receiving a modern education harmed your ability to work and function in the modern world. And one of the things that really surprised me in the documentary was that often it's the women in Hasidic communities who are sent out to work because the men are spending their time learning the Torah and studying religious things. And that
Yeah,
really
that's
surprised me. Because I think when people think of any kind of traditional community, there's a sort of gendered assumption that the men do the work and the women are kept at home. And it sounded like there was the opposite there. So how does that work in the Hasidic community?
yeah, and that's also one of the differences between Hasidim and non-Hasidim. So in the Litvish communities, it's more common. It used to be more common for the women to be the providers and the men to study Torah. So, for example, in Lakewood, this was the system in Lakewood, and Lakewood was mostly a Litvish environment. Although today you have, I think, many Hasidim also living in Lakewood. But Lakewood was the biggest, the most famous yeshiva. Litvish yeshiva was in Lakewood, New Jersey. But it's so, and one of the things also, one of the differences between Hasidim and Litvish would be that the Litvish women are driving cars, but the Hasidic women are forbidden to drive, like it was in Saudi Arabia.
So how does money enter the community? Because it sounds like there's an attempt to avoid assimilating in any way, but at the same time, it sounds like you got to work a job somehow. So how does that work?
I can tell you that in my community, in my ghetto, Hasidic ghetto where I grew up in Kiryas Tosh, many families that have 7 children, 10 children, 12 children or more are living in basements like we lived in where you don't even have a window to the front street. If when a taxi comes to pick you up with your children, you can't see the taxi from the window. You can't see the bus, the school bus from the window. You need to wait in the winter outside or something. And many mothers don't even have a cell phone. And by the way, in these communities, smartphones are forbidden. So they have special kosher phone, what's called, has no connection to YouTube, to internet, or has censored internet. And there are there are companies of internet censorship. There are different companies for that and for kosher phones. So I can tell you that many people say you need, if you grew up in these Hasidic systems, you can't live outside the community, but you can live inside, and that's a big mistake. Because when you live inside the community, you can also be, you can be very poor and with your whole family, and nobody cares for you. So it's a myth that some people think that as long you are inside the Hasidic community, then you are taken care of. And the only problem is if you want that you can't leave. That's the biggest lie ever, because many Hasidim are going hungry. I heard once on one of the documentaries, or in the New York Times, I think, in the New York Times article, there was a few articles about the Hasidic system in New York. And there was a critical article, but even the critical article was sugar-coated. For example, by saying that no Hasidim in Borough Park or wherever are going hungry, because everyone, as long as you are inside the Hasidic community, you are taken care of. That's a big lie ever.
So how did you get out of that? Because it sounds like there's a financial challenge in addition to the ideological one. What was your way of being able to live on your own?
I don't live on my own. I'm still very much dependent in different programs to survive. Everything we did till now was just in a surviving mode. We never had. I mean, when I was still Hasidic, I was a Hasidic Torah teacher. I was a tutor, private tutor, and I was teaching. I was teaching sometimes children of the Hasidic philanthropists, and I was a tester in 4 classes each week, the 4 high classes of the elementary school. I was testing them the Torah and the Talmud, and I needed to know all the different tractates and portions of each of each of the 4 classes, because everyone I had to test for other Talmudic tractates and stuff like this. So I did this. This was obviously very difficult, but this was when I was still Hasidic. But after we left, I didn't even have this, you know.
Yeah. So have you found some new profession in some way, or is it still an ongoing struggle?
We are doing different things, and my wife is doing things. But even when we are doing a lot of things, you know, to have the skills of monetizing your work takes extra skills.
Yeah.
That not everyone is born with it or were taught. And so most of the work we do, both my wife and me, is on on a voluntary basis, and we did this for decades. So I would never, I can't say that we are stable when it comes to our economy.
Yeah. Is there a solution there, or something that you think might work in the future, or something that others who've made that switch have discovered?
There are definitely solutions. I mean, I don't know if you're talking now about my particular situation, or you're talking in general about
Either, both.
So when it comes to my personal, there are sometimes projects and things that could help us a lot, but we can't do it by ourselves. And if we don't have support or advice how to do it, and connections and resources, then it's like you can have, imagine you have a $500,000 on the table, but your hands are bound and you can't stretch out your hands to take it. And it lies there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. How will you feel? You'll feel the biggest loser ever, because it lies on the table, but you don't take it, or you can't take it, right? That's sometimes how people in our situation are actually feeling, because they have, people like us, sometimes we have the skills and we have the stuff how to make the money, but we need the tools to activate it, and to stretch out their hands, and to take off the ropes that you are physically or mentally wrapped around with, and to take the $500 that lies on the table. And as long as your ropes are not loose, you can't take it, and you feel the biggest loser ever.
Yeah, I can relate to that after leaving Christianity. You know, if you've built up all of your connections in a particular community, then when you leave, you're not only losing all of the connections you've built, but you've also not had time spent building up other connections. So, you know, it's that saying that it takes a village, and it's really hard to do things that it requires a village for while you're leaving your village, which it sounds like is similar to the situation that you've experienced.
Yeah. And they are definitely, I don't know if I want to go into very much details for specific reasons, that I don't want to spill everything to the public. But there are projects that we are involved in that are much bigger than the projects we already did. And it's just a matter of the moral support or advice, just moral support how to do things, and the resources in order to projects, and I'm not talking just about economy, but also projects that would bring that will make big progress in for thousands and thousands of, or hundreds of thousands of or 1.5 million ultra-Orthodox people around the world.
So if someone wants to support the work you're doing,
having the right resources.
yeah, if someone wants to support the work that you're doing or contribute in some way, how could they do that?
I think the best way, maybe one of the ways would be through my wife's Patreon account. I can send you a link to that.
Yeah, please do. We'll put it in the show notes.
But I'm also involved with teaching. I'm having classes, lectures, and conversations a few times a week on social audio app, where I had there 2,900 followers on this app called Clubhouse, and there's a lot of recorded rooms in there about all kinds of interesting and controversial topics in Judaism and Jewish history and rabbinic thought. And I posted some articles and Google Docs, and yeah, so I'll send you this thing, and you will see many of them listed there.
You know, one of the things you brought up in this conversation is the apathy or lack of interest that the general public has in helping children who are in the situation that you grew up in. And
yeah,
I was curious where you thought that came from, or why that was.
The apathy among general society.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe people are indifferent in general, and maybe here you have extra layers because these PR, the PR people who are working for these different cults, they are, in recent years, they came out with a new strategy that they weaponized, and they call it anti-Semitism. And so some of them, what they do is they say, any criticism that you have on a Hasidic system, you're an anti-Semite. So if you care for Hasidic, for Jewish children, for Hasidic children, you're an anti-Semite. If you're unhappy with Hasidic abuse, you're an anti-Semite. And I don't know how anyone can fall for that, because if my common sense work, I would say the opposite, that anti-Semitism is indifference for Jewish children. And if you care for Jewish children and Jewish adults, that's the opposite of anti-Semitism. But I'm sure that some people are actually threatened by that. And they say, oh, I don't want no one should call me an anti-Semite, so I'm not going to say anything, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I think that people need to be aware where the address of the criticism should be. I don't think the criticism needs to be addressed to the Hasidic leadership or the Hasidic system, because they themselves are the first victims. And the Hasidim themselves are the first victims of the Hasidic system. They are the biggest victims ever. If we criticize the Hasidic system, we have to criticize it with the right address. We have to criticize the outsiders who doesn't belong to the Hasidic system, but support the abuse for their own gain. And these are, in New York, for example, the government, the politicians, the judges in New York who are getting voted by Hasidic black votes, and the politicians who are getting voted by Hasidic black votes, who always, as you can see in the documentary One of Us, and in other articles and documentaries, where they always take the side of the cult and never the side of the victims or the side of the children or the side of the parents. And for simple as that, for Hasidic black votes, it's all about politician and hypocrisy. So I think the anger and the criticism and the punishments needs to be mostly addressed to, not towards Hasidic leadership, but toward the outside leadership, the Gentile leadership, politicians, judges, and this is happening in New York, it happens in the UK, it happens in Israel, and probably in other places, and in Canada.
In any system of abuse, there's the perpetrator, there's the victim, but it sounds like the group that you're describing is the bystanders or the people who are complicit. They may not be enacting the abuse themselves, but they're bystanding while it occurs.
Bystanding, and sometimes, and some of these people are even supporting the abuse in different ways, financially, politically, socially, and sometimes you have these people, even secular people, who are or secular Jews who are silencing the victims, silencing survivors, silencing activists. And I was told that the reason is because I was told that many secular Jews today, or secular Jewish communities and leadership, believe that we need the Hasidim for better or for worse, because the Hasidim are not assimilating so fast and in such a big percentage-wise as the regular Jewish people, and they don't intermarry so much, and the Hasidic high reproductive rate is very high, where Hasidim, every Hasidic family goes between 7 and 22 children, right? Like my aunt had 18 children, and they think that for the future of Judaism or for the future of Israel, we need the Hasidim, and that's why they say and that's why they are willing to sacrifice the Hasidic people, for so to speak, for the sake of survival of Judaism or survival of Israel. And that's what I heard in the name of different secular Jews, and it makes very much sense to me that this is a very big thing, so I think that's a big issue that we have. And if all this is true, then my anger and criticism will be much more directed towards secular Jews and secular Jewish leadership, much more than my anger and criticism towards Hasidic leadership or Hasidic people.
Another attitude I've noticed among people outside the Jewish community is this idea that, well, those are their children, and it's up to them how they want to raise their children. And there's this idea in the culture in general that you can't tell someone else how to raise their child, that everyone gets to make their own parenting decisions. And even if something is going on that might be considered bad, well, it's not my place to tell them how to raise their child. And I'm curious what your thoughts on that attitude would be.
Okay, I think that's nonsense for many reasons. First of all, if this would be true, then I wonder how if these people would also say about the Taliban, for example, or other cults, that we should not intervene. Because where do you draw the line? That's number one. Number two, the fact is that Hasidic parents are not having the choice where to send the people. You know, me and my wife, our children were almost taken away from us, our 4 children, by the Hasidic system, who manipulated the childcare services many years ago to control us and to take away our children, because we were thinking outside the box. And this was done to us where both parents were on the same page. So imagine what is done to other families who the 2 parents are mostly not on the same page. Imagine, you can see in the documentary One of Us how the separation that is done between parents and children all the time in the Hasidic system, through the government, through the judges, through the court system, through the official system, right? And through the childcare services. So the hypocrisy is very big. So it's nonsense to say, because the parents, in fact, are not in control. So what are you talking about? Even if the parents would be in control, how could they be in control if the parents themselves are brainwashed since they were babies? But it's not just that. It's the parents are not in control at all, because the parents cannot do what they want. Look, if you just watch the documentary One of Us, and then after you watch the documentary, then tell me if the parents are actually in control or who is in control. The fact is the cult is in control and not the parents.
Hmm.
The fact is that the politicians and the judges in New York are supporting the abusive system, going against the children, against the parents, against the father, against the mother, just for their own gain of Hasidic black votes, and support the abuse of 100,000 children in New York itself. According to Haaretz headline, in New York itself, you have 100,000 children who are deprived from education, for example, because of these hypocrisy. That goes, by the way, against the law. It goes against the American Constitution and the American law.
So it sounds also like if a politician wants to enforce that law, they're going to go up against the political will of this group.
And it's not the political will of the group. It's a political will of the leadership.
Got it. So the person in a leadership position will tell everyone, look, they're going against us, and this is how we got to vote.
Exactly. They are forced. So, for example, what they do in some Hasidic sects like Bells, for example, how they manipulate parents to vote all unanimously for united for the same vote. They would give, for example, every child who brings a paper receipt where they can see who the parents voted for, this child will get a present in the yeshiva. This young child will get a present in the yeshiva. And if the child didn't bring the paper, the child comes home without a present. And the child sees all their colleagues got a present, but they didn't got a present. And Hasidic parents are manipulated and threatened in that way. They feel they are abusing their child if they don't give the child a paper that the yeshiva demands from them to prove that they voted for the right vote.
So in America, I don't think you get a receipt for voting, or that your voting is secret.
This was done, I think. No. I think this was done in America.
Okay.
If I remember
Interesting.
correctly. Yeah.
Is it like just the I voted receipt, or is it actually show who they voted for?
No, who they voted for.
Interesting.
I don't remember the details, but I can ask my wife about it.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that. My assumption is that America had secret ballots. So,
you think there's no way, there's no proof that you can prove for your Hasidic leader that you voted for the right person? There's no way to prove that.
I mean, it sounds like there is. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, that I heard about it a few years ago, and I heard about it very detailed from the Belz Hasidim themselves, from the parents themselves. So it's not something that I made up, or that my wife made up.
Yeah.
And I think they were talking about it in social media, and maybe in I don't know if there was an article about it, but there was definitely talk about it on social media, Hasidic social media.
So I'm curious what you would say to someone in a position to do something about this, to enforce the law, a politician, a judge who says, look, I agree with you, but if I do this, we're going to have a political fight where they take my job, and I don't know how to weather that. What would you say to someone in that position?
I think it's a matter of selling your soul to Satan. I mean, it's like people that would support Nazis or Hitler for political gain. I don't see any difference. I don't see any difference. But I think, but that's why I believe that the most important, the number one thing is to hold people accountable. Because if politicians and judges and people are responsible are not held accountable, why should they behave? Why should they choose to do good if they never hold accountable? So I think the first thing should be that the people are responsible should be held accountable. People should go to prison. People have to pay reparations for the victims. And the minute, and the radio and the TV should talk about it every day or every week, and that way they wouldn't be able to to ignore it. But as long no one is held accountable, then obviously they're going to ignore it.
It sounds like almost,
just about themselves.
yeah, it sounds like almost using the same tactic from the other side, the same way that there are people who will say, look, if you go against us, we'll vote you out of office. You would say, look, if you don't protect children, we'll vote you out of office.
Exactly. Me, myself, I got death threats when in 2014, when we filed the lawsuit, you know?
Yeah.
But it's not, so I don't know if I would be in the place of the politicians, what I would do. I don't know, because they say power corrupts and money corrupts you and everything. But that's why we need to hold people accountable. If people would suffer, if people would lose more from the hypocrisy than from support, then from, if people would lose more from the hypocrisy from supporting abuse, then they will have to choose the right path. But if they are not held accountable, then you're right. Why should they harm themselves? They will always, most people would think about themselves before they think about the Hasidim,
Yeah. Well, John, I really appreciate everything you've shared. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure we get to before we finish?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of things that we didn't cover, but maybe if you want, we can continue one day. I don't know, another time, if there's something important that I want to share. I don't know if we have to do everything today. What do you?
Well, I'd like to get everything in one recording, ideally. There's one thing that you mentioned before while we were just setting up, which was that there was something you'd written early on in your career that had been censored, and you'd mentioned wanting to tell that story, and we didn't get to that. So I'm curious what that was.
Yeah, so this was my debut article, and that I wrote in my life, and this was when we were still Hasidic, and this was in a rabbinic magazine, and the people, the person who was the manager of this anthology, of this rabbinic anthology, this person was my classmate. He was my chavruta. He was my study partner, and he was jealous at me because some would say that the name of the article, the name of the rabbinic article was the Apple Mystery, and something halachic history and conversation about about different things, about blessings on food and sexuality and different things that had to do with apple and with other fruits and vegetables that was also called apple in Yiddish or in German in different centuries, and confusions that happened because of that, where some rabbis were talking, let's say, about potatoes or talking about a squash, but other later rabbis in later centuries understood it to mean potatoes, and they weren't aware that in the Middle Ages, potatoes didn't exist in Europe. It was only in America. And these rabbis were not aware, and they built castles on these sentences and paragraphs. For example, what blessing do you have to make on potatoes? So some rabbis said, oh, on potatoes, you have to make shahakol and not adama. And they brought a paragraph from the Middle Ages. They weren't even aware that this Middle Age paragraph cannot refer to potatoes because there was no potatoes in Europe. So they say that this article was the most interesting article of the whole anthology. And this manager of the rabbinic magazine, of the rabbinic anthology, was it was an unofficial anthology that was only coming up once in a few years. And I have it here. If you want, I can show you the magazine, the anthology, with a hardcover from the year 2000, or from the year 2001, and So guess what he did? He censored my whole article. He did not publish it at all. But you only see it in the content, the beginning of the book. It's, by the way, it's in Hebrew. So in the beginning of the anthology, where you have the content and all the articles and the names, you have this article, but inside the anthology, inside the magazine, you don't have it. But he couldn't say to me that he's not going to publish my article. So he manipulated. He sent a messenger to me saying that something happened with something technically went wrong in the computer, in the PDF or whatever, and that's how it happened, as if it was not done intentionally.
What was the reason for the censorship?
So the real reason, I believe, was jealousy, but for himself, to justify it for himself and to his friends, obviously he found a religious reason, saying that there were some things in this article that is too much thinking outside the box. And so he found a religious justification for it. But he himself knew that this religious justification is nonsense, and that's why he couldn't say it to me. Or and that's number one. Number two, if you have a religious issue, you can censor this paragraph, but you don't have to annihilate the whole article, right? You can always censor one paragraph. But why did you cancel the whole piece, the long article? So obviously it was jealousy and feeling threatened by me. And it's especially interesting because this same manager of the magazine, besides me, he had actually more than one long article in the same magazine, and his articles are actually interesting. And most articles in this magazine are very boring. His articles was actually interesting. So logically, he should have the least jealous of all people. He should be the least jealous of my article. But he was the one, in fact, who decided that they're going to skip the whole thing. And I still have the anthology, and I can show everyone where everyone who can read Hebrew can see where in the beginning of the anthology you have the content, and in the content you have this title of that by the way, it's the only curiosity title of the whole content. There, if you go through the whole content, all the articles, I don't think it would be very hard to find any title that should entice curiosity. This was a real weird title, the mystery of the apple, or the apple mystery. And you can still see it in the content, but inside it's not there. And it took me many years to find out that this was done intentionally, because I was so naive that when this colleague of his came to me and told me that this was a technical issue, I really believed it.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like what the French philosopher René Girard called mimetic competition, that people who are actually more alike are more likely to be jealous of each other because they both want the same role. No, someone who's completely different from you is not jealous of you because they don't want to be you. They want to be them, and them is very different. But
exactly.
But he sounds like he's wanting to be the same type of, intellectual Jewish person that you are.
Yeah. But then you have to understand the whole consequences of this thing, where I don't know how to explain it in worldly manner because I'm uneducated. But imagine when you go to a college, university, and you get your first degree, and after you get your first degree, it's easier for you to get a second degree, to get a third degree, or after you give your first class, for example, as a professor or as a show talker, after you give one talk show and people liking you, then you have the more support to go on. But if your first talk show was sabotage and it was a flop, or it didn't even happen, then then you would say, okay, I'm not good for it. Forget about it, right?
So,
Or
so this was sort of your
especially
first academic publishing opportunity in
this
the
this
Hasidic
was my
community.
first this was my first academic Hasidic opportunity, and it took me many years to actual publish something.
Yeah. Do you feel like that might also have been one of those events where something went wrong that worked in your favor? Because if you'd had a really successful, publishing career in that world, maybe we wouldn't be on this talking now.
Um, um, it's possible, but I'm not. I don't know. I will have to think about it a lot.
Sure.
And out. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But it was definitely what you call it. It was definitely social and financial abuse.
Hmm. Before we finish, I want to ask, it sounds like you've endured a lot of challenging situations and abusive behavior. And I'm curious for you, what is it you do to process that? What is it that helps you become emotionally stable, centered, and all of those things
I
and
don't know
heal?
okay, so I don't know if I'm stable, but I do. But one of the things that I try to do is like, for example, on my Clubhouse bio, in the beginning, it says survivor and healer. So I try to be a healer, and many my wife and me inspired, we can say, thousands of ultra-Orthodox people, but there are many of them that you could actually see their names, and many of them who actually did big things directly or indirectly because of our model, or because of direct influence and advice and support, moral support and advice that we offer them. And among them are even famous people, like, for example, Abi Stein, who is known as to be the first Hasidic, the first woman rabbi with Hasidic smicha, with Hasidic rabbinical degree. She's known to be the first Hasidic transgender woman. She published she's a speaker, she's an activist. She published a memoir called Becoming Eve. And she was kind enough to mention me in her speech at McGill, in her speech at McGill University, about me and my wife being involved in helping her when she was still a Hasidic man with a shtreimel, and we didn't even know at the time that she's transgender. We had no idea about it, and obviously we couldn't know at the time that one day this 20-year-old Hasidic young man is soon going to become a celebrity. But that's what happened very soon. And the main support that she got from us was about her transformation from being a part of Hasidic dynasty to leave the fold, and it was about her child. She was afraid that she's going to lose contact with her child and stuff like this. So she's one of the people that we were involved. There were other people, other famous people like Avi Förster in Israel, who wrote on Facebook about it. He was a Hasidic celebrity. He was a Hasidic an ultra-Orthodox radio talk show host on Radio Kol Chai, and then he left with his wife and 6 children, and many other people. But I just mentioned these two because they are like famous people.
That's excellent. They both sound really interesting. So you put healer in your bio. What does that mean to you?
So that I'm a survivor, but I'm also try to be a healer also.
So you're not just helping yourself, but helping others.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. And helping others. If you go to my bio on Clubhouse, you will see a list of different ways and how we help other people. There are about 5, 6, 7 methods that we use. For example, talks, lectures, video clips, podcasts, articles in 3 languages, coaching, writing, and teaching. By the way, my wife was very famous in the Hasidic community still because she was a songwriter, Hasidic songwriter in Yiddish, and her songs are still used today in Hasidic circles for indoctrinational purposes, because she wrote long preaching songs to glorify the ultra-Orthodox system. And when she wrote these songs, she actually believed in it. So today they still use her songs, but they censor her name because since we left the fold. And just before we left, there were two Hasidic musical CDs was produced by L'chaim Productions based on my wife's songs. In Yiddish, it was called the Yiddish Heart and the Yiddish Treer, what means the Jewish heart and the Jewish tear. So yes, so obviously this contributed a lot to the publicity and the influence that we have, because many people know her songs by heart even before they knew her name.
Is she getting residuals for that? Is she getting paid for that?
No, that's one of the things of Hasidic manipulation, where the Hasidic music production never paid us any royalties since this happened in 2000, 2008, 2007. Yes.
You might have your next lawsuit there, or a solution to financial issues.
That's when one of the tasks that we still didn't do yet. Yes, but maybe we just need to ask him. Maybe we don't need a lawsuit. We never.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty clear cut. If you write the music, you own it, and if they publish it, they owe you for whatever they're making from it, especially if they don't have a contract.
They did make some contract, unofficial contract, but a lawyer told me that in any case, doesn't matter what is written in the contract, it doesn't matter what the deal was or what he didn't tell us, what he didn't inform us. In any case, the royalties have to be paid, and also there is the royalty issue, but there is also the issue of censoring her name. So since in the beginning, in the first edition or the second edition, her name was there, but in later editions, her name was. You
have
censored.
Such an obvious lawsuit there. That is, some of the things you've talked about in this podcast might be challenging lawsuits, but this is, to me, an open and shut case. I hope you get some royalties. Speaking of which, what is your process, or what was your process for finding and speaking with lawyers? Because I think the legal system is very daunting for people who are not lawyers or are new to it. So I'm curious what your experience was there and what your advice would be to people attempting similar legal action.
I didn't have much lawyers that I talked about. I think I was only involved with 2 law firms in my life. With a third lawyer, I was involved not for me but for a cousin of mine that was that had issues with the Hasidic dynasty that she was married into and abused by. But I didn't have much to do with lawyers, and even when I did have, most of the things were talked to my wife, For example, she understands about this much more than me.
So when you were doing your lawsuit, you had conversations with her, and then the two of you sort of handed it off to them.
I was talking with the lawyers, obviously, but I wouldn't say that I know much. And
Sure.
most of the documents and files that was written, I didn't really go over it,
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything else that you want to add before we finish, or any final thoughts that you have for this conversation?
I'm also suffering on my eyesight since I'm 25 or 26 years old. And this happened because of a very specific shaming that happened to me at the age of 25 in Kiryas Tosh, but that's a story for itself. That has to do with accusation of spreading heresy. That was, by the way, a false accusation, but that's a story for itself. And since then, I lost, at the age of 26, I lost 3/4 of my eyesight. I couldn't see my 5 fingers.
Wow.
But then later, I gained parts of my eyesight back through medicine and stuff. I'm still taking, till today, I'm still taking some medicine for it. And now I'm 45, turning 46. I have other mental issues that I had in recent years. So obviously we can use a lot of support, but I like to talk more about the progress that we did and the progress that we aim for than to talk about mental issues, mental issues or physical and medical issues.
Well, that sounds like a good place to finish. What is the progress that you've accomplished so far, and what is the progress that you aim for?
So what we accomplished so far, I think some of them I already talked about, and one of them was the program that the revolution that happened here to all Hasidic boys in Quebec, that they are enrolled in some kind of daily secular education. They call it a homeschool program. That's for thousands of Hasidic boys, and that's one thing. And other things that I talked about, but there's also some articles, and that is coming out soon in different languages, and I don't want to go into much details about it now, but for different reasons. But maybe another time, if we have a meeting before, what we will talk and what not. And all these ways that I talked about is something that is doing and would do, could bring big progress in different ways for, let's say, for 1.5 million ultra-Orthodox.
Well, John, I hope you get the progress you're seeking. Thank you so much for your efforts to protect children. And I will include in the show notes links to all the things you've mentioned.
Thank you so much, Brendon. It was a pleasure talking to you.
You too. Thank you.